In the late hours of the night in Los Angeles, Louis sneaks into a train yard, intent on cutting through a chain-link fence. Just as he begins, a beam of light approaches, forcing him to quickly stow his tools. A security guard arrives, requesting to see identification. Louis steps closer, feigning compliance, only to suddenly strike the guard, rendering him unconscious before swiping the guard's watch. Louis then heads to a scrapyard, where he engages in a prolonged negotiation with the foreman to sell the stolen fence. Despite his best efforts to sweeten the deal with corporate jargon, the foreman rejects his pitch, refusing to hire him. When Louis proposes an unpaid internship for the sake of experience, the foreman scoffs, revealing that he knows the fence was stolen and that he would never employ a thief. Later, while driving, Louis notices several police cars speeding by. Curious, he pulls over to observe. It turns out there has been a serious accident, with a car engulfed in flames and people trapped inside. At the scene, Joe and his assistant arrive to record the incident, capturing every detail on camera. Louis watches intently, fascinated by their work. When they finish, Louis approaches Joe, inquiring about his profession. Joe explains that he's a stringer, a freelancer who rushes to crime scenes or accidents to film footage, which he then sells to the highest bidding news outlet. The job only requires a camera and a police scanner. Intrigued, Louis asks if Joe is hiring, but Joe declines. The following day, Louis sees the accident footage on television, which strengthens his resolve to break into the stringer business. He heads to the beach, waits for someone to get distracted, and steals a bike. He pawns the bike for store credit, using it to acquire a camcorder and a police scanner. That night, Louis begins listening to the scanner, quickly realizing he doesn't understand the codes and needs to learn the quickest routes to the scenes. His first attempt leads him to a simple arrest, where the cops promptly send him away. He next tries to film a woman stopped for drunk driving, but once again, the officers shut him down. Eventually, he arrives at the site of a fatal carjacking, getting close enough to capture some graphic footage. This angers a nearby officer, who orders both Louis and another stringer away from the scene. The other stringer, frustrated, curses at Louis for ruining his shot. Undeterred, Louis eavesdrops on the stringer's phone call to learn how to negotiate with news stations. Louis then visits Channel 6, where he presents his footage to news director Nina. Impressed by his close-up shots, Nina calls over producer Frank, who is appalled by the graphic nature of the images. Frank argues against airing the footage on a morning show, but Nina overrules him, stating that they'll just add a viewer warning. Louis attempts to negotiate a better price for the footage but settles for less than he hoped. Nina, however, sees potential in Louis, advising him to get a better camera for improved image quality. She also shares that their audience is most interested in graphic accidents and violent crimes in affluent neighborhoods. The next morning, Louis sees his footage on TV and feels a sense of accomplishment. He downloads the clip and starts memorizing police codes from an online list. Later, he interviews a young man named Rick, once again employing corporate lingo to steer the conversation. Impressed by Rick's familiarity with the area and GPS skills, Louis hires him as an unpaid intern. Rick protests, explaining his precarious financial situation, so Louis reluctantly agrees to pay him $30 per night. That evening, Louis and Rick sit in the car, scanning police frequencies for any incidents of interest. Louis uses the time to teach Rick the codes, and after hours of waiting, they finally hear about a fire. They rush to the scene, with Rick providing directions, but Louis drives erratically, yelling at Rick in desperation to arrive first. Rick, nervous, gives incorrect directions, and by the time they reach the location, it's too late. The paramedics have already taken the victim away. After being taunted by Joe for arriving late, Louis angrily demands better communication from Rick. The next time they catch a lead, Louis refrains from shouting, and they make it to the scene on time. However, the police have already secured the area, leaving little to film. Refusing to give up, Louis sneaks into the house after the cops are distracted. Inside, he finds bullet holes in the kitchen and rearranges the fridge photos to create a more tragic scene before filming the evidence. He also pockets some junk mail to get the victims' names. Later, Louis brings the footage to Nina, who is thrilled with his work. Frank once again objects, pointing out that Louis clearly broke into the house and stole private correspondence, but Nina decides to air the footage anyway. From that point on, Louis and Rick become highly successful, consistently finding and recording compelling stories to sell to Nina. Rick expertly navigates routes while Louis captures every gritty detail, careful to stay out of the cops' way. Louis also avidly watches his footage on TV, downloading clips to build a personal collection. As they earn more money, Louis invests in better equipment, including a second camera for Rick, allowing them to capture different angles of each scene. One night, they arrive at a car accident before the police. Louis tries to interview a driver, who angrily brushes him off while frantically speaking to a 911 operator. Moving on, Louis finds the other driver dead in a poorly lit area. He drags the body into the car lights to get a better shot and films everything until the police arrive and send him away. Joe spots Louis walking by and realizes he's missed out on this opportunity. Later, when Louis shows his footage to Nina, she notices a streak of blood on his sleeve. He dismisses her concern and casually invites her to dinner. Initially, Nina declines, citing the need to maintain their professional relationship. However, Louis subtly hints that he might stop supplying her with valuable footage if she refuses, leaving Nina with little choice but to accept. The following day, Joe encounters Louis and shares his plans to expand his team with multiple vans, hoping to recruit Louis. Louis flatly declines, and when Joe persists, Louis threatens him with physical harm. Joe, seething with anger, storms off, cursing Louis under his breath. When Saturday arrives, Louis and Nina meet for dinner at a restaurant. Louis candidly admits his desire for a romantic relationship, but Nina rejects the notion, stating that their dinner was merely a professional courtesy. Louis then bombards her with data from his research, highlighting that her station is the lowest rated and that his footage has been instrumental in attracting thousands of new viewers. He reminds her that her contract is nearing its end and implies that her job security hinges on accepting his terms. Reluctantly, Nina agrees to meet Louis on weekends, exchanging intimacy for exclusive rights to his videos. Sometime later, Rick makes a navigational error, causing Louis to miss the biggest story of the night. Joe and his team arrive first and capture all the footage, taunting Louis afterward. At the end of the night, Louis presents Nina with recordings of minor incidents, but Nina snaps, furious that their rival station will scoop the big story. She feels betrayed, thinking she compromised herself for nothing. The next morning, Louis watches Joe's footage on the rival channel, his anger boiling over. In a fit of rage, he shatters his bathroom mirror. Determined to get revenge, he decides to sabotage Joe's van. That night, Louis and Rick arrive just in time to film a car crash, only to discover that it's Joe's van involved in the accident. Joe is gravely injured, being loaded into an ambulance. Rick hesitates, feeling it's wrong to film a fellow stringer, but Louis coldly disregards this and records every gruesome detail as Joe glares at him, choking on his own blood. A few nights later, Louis and Rick arrive early at the scene of a break-in at a large mansion, beating the cops to the location. Louis stealthily follows the fleeing criminals, capturing clear footage of their faces and the license plate of their van. He then enters the mansion, filming every bloodstain he finds, carefully following the trail to each victim's body. He meticulously records each one, even crafting a scene with an empty crib to evoke fear that there might be a dead baby involved. Upon discovering that one victim is still alive, Louis heartlessly films the man's last moments before fleeing with Rick just as the police arrive. They pull over a few blocks away, where Louis quickly edits the footage, cutting out the parts showing the criminals and the living victim. He then takes the edited video to Nina, who is deeply impressed by its intensity. As usual, Frank is horrified and calls the station's lawyer to assess the legal implications. The lawyer warns that they're on thin ice but assures them that as long as they blur faces and omit the address, they should be fine. Louis demands $15,000 for the footage. When Nina balks at the price, Louis finally loses his cool. He asserts that he holds all the power and insists that from now on, Nina must meet his demands without complaint. He also requires that the news anchors credit his company, Video Production News, and that Nina introduce him to her colleagues to help him establish connections. Terrified, Nina agrees. As the news goes live, Louis watches with satisfaction as the anchors credit his company while presenting the footage. They dramatize the crime scene, guided by Nina's cues to amplify the fear and shock value. During a commercial break, Nina's bosses call to congratulate her and express interest in meeting Louis. The next morning, Detective Frontieri and her partner visit Louis at his apartment to ask some questions. Louis fabricates a story, claiming he entered the house after hearing shots, intending to help but finding the victims already dead, so he began filming. He mentions seeing a van drive away but pretends he didn't get a good look at the criminals. The detectives remain suspicious but lack the evidence to press further and leave. Louis then uses the license plate he recorded to track down one of the criminals' addresses. He and Rick stake out the house, waiting for the criminal to emerge. When Rick spots the van, he questions why Louis hasn't called the cops yet. Louis explains that he's waiting for the criminals to head to a more populated area, hoping they'll resist arrest and create a more dramatic story. Rick, realizing the danger, demands a raise. Louis tells Rick to name his price, and Rick hesitantly asks for $75 a night. Louis quickly agrees, leaving Rick regretting that he didn't ask for more. When Rick tries to renegotiate, Louis cuts him off, saying it's too late. When the criminal finally leaves the house, Louis and Rick follow as he picks up his partner. They continue tailing the criminals until they stop at a fast food restaurant. Louis finally calls the cops, providing detailed descriptions and informing them that the suspects are armed. He even offers his name as the informant. After hanging up, Rick realizes Louis intends to claim the police reward and demands half. Furious but needing the second camera for better angles, Louis grudgingly agrees, sending Rick to the other side of the restaurant to set up. Soon after, the police arrive and approach the criminals, who immediately open fire, sparking a chaotic shootout that results in multiple fatalities. Louis and Rick capture everything on camera, including the death of one criminal and the injury of the other, who manages to escape in his van. The cops give chase, and Louis swiftly picks up Rick before joining the pursuit. As Louis drives recklessly, he continuously yells at Rick to keep filming, despite the danger. The chase becomes increasingly intense, with a civilian car colliding with a police vehicle, forcing it out of the pursuit. The remaining police car stays on the criminal's tail, but the criminal begins ramming the police vehicle, eventually causing a crash that takes both vehicles out of commission. Louis seizes the opportunity, rushing to film the aftermath, announcing that the criminal is dead. He calls Rick over to capture more detailed footage, but when Rick approaches, the criminal, still alive, suddenly fired his weapon at Rick. Louis, showing no surprise, continues to film as the wounded criminal exits his vehicle. Before the criminal can turn his attention to Louis, the sound of approaching sirens spooks him, prompting a desperate attempt to flee. However, the police arrive and quickly fire a weapon at the criminal, which brought the criminal down. Louis then turns his camera on Rick, filming his injuries as Rick realizes with horror that Louis knew the criminal was alive and used him as bait to get a more sensational story. Showing no remorse, Louis retrieves Rick's camera after he succumbs to his injuries. Later, Louis delivers the footage to Nina, who is thrilled with the graphic content. As they prepare to go live, Frank informs Nina that a reliable source has revealed that the crime at the house wasn't a random act of violence. The family had ties to organized crime and was hiding illegal substances. However, Nina refuses to include this detail in the report, insisting that the narrative of innocent victims sells better. When Frank accuses her of sounding like Louis, she takes it as a compliment, noting that Louis has pushed them to strive for greater heights. Detective Frontieri arrives at the station, demanding the footage as evidence. Nina refuses to hand it over without a warrant. Subsequently, Frontieri brings Louis in for questioning, but he remains composed and sticks to his story. Frustrated, Frontieri calls out Louis for his unethical and dangerous methods, but is forced to release him due to a lack of evidence. A few nights later, Louis expands his operation, acquiring 2 vans branded with the Video Production News logo and hiring 3 interns. He informs them that they won't be paid, but promises not to ask them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. Together, they set out in search of the next big story. And that's the dark and gripping tale of Louis and his ruthless rise in the world of crime journalism. His journey into the heart of sensationalism and moral decay is a chilling reminder of the lengths some will go for success. If you found this recap as intense as the story itself, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the most compelling films. What did you think of Louis' actions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more thrilling recaps.